Hello, friends. Welcome to yet another edition of DynamicCISO LinkedIn Live episode. As part of our continued focus on cybersecurity for the entire first quarter of 2021, we have tried to bring in lots of new dimensions, diverse viewpoints, and knowledge sharing sessions by technology expert and thought leaders. Now, before I introduce our guest for today's LinkedIn Live episode, let me spend a few minutes on giving you a context. As a practice, we all have grown up seeing most security companies and other analyst and consulting organizations, including the ones which actually help shape the global agenda. They release forward-looking reports about what's to come next year. Unfortunately, nobody in 2019 anticipated the global pandemic or the global reaction to it. In one way or the other, our personal lives were upended. Organizations were forced to make decisions that fundamentally and perhaps permanently changed the way we do business. The onslaught of pandemic was devastating in many different ways. It looked as if we talk of the cyber security, the context of cyber security, it looked as if cyber criminals hit a jackpot, a bonanza, and a number of attacks in every damn sphere spiked. Be it ordinary attacks like phishing, business email compromise, malware injection, to the most sophisticated state-sponsored APTs that resulted into massive disruptions in the critical infrastructure and also supply chain attacks like SolarWinds. Um, but while the 2020 was filled with great uncertainty, there are still guarantees in the cybersecurity realm. Threat actors will certainly continue to attack without any regard or respect for the challenges faced by their targets. These actors continue to be motivated by espionage and monetary gain, though their methods will always keep evolving. Uh, this means that organizations will continue to be breached, resulting in business disruptions, data compromise, reputational, and almost always big financial losses. So, if we talk of near term, the coronavirus will likely continue to have a significant impact on normal business operations, with a focus on supporting remote work, virtual events, and new productivity platforms. The pandemic has actually forced almost every organization to become better at operating under significantly changed working conditions, and in the wake of changing environment, IT and IT security challenges will most likely persist throughout 2021 as well. Now, to discuss a multitude of issues in the cybersecurity realm, which seems to be one of the most concerning and also one of the most important areas for businesses, for boards, for management, I have with me Vijendra Katyar. Vijendra is the Director Enterprise Business India and SARC for Trend Micro. As a pioneering cybersecurity product and solutions company, Trend has catered to over 250 plus million endpoints and 500,000 plus companies worldwide over the last 30 odd years. The company's vision has been to make the world safe for exchanging digital information. Welcome, Vijendra, for this LinkedIn Live session.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you so much for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So let me just begin with something very exciting that I also got my hands on, which is Trend Micro's recently launched a constant state of flux Trend Micro 2020 annual cybersecurity report. Um, what are some of the key highlights that you would like to share with all our InfoSec professionals and CISOs who are listening to us right now?
Yeah, the report was really, really interesting, Rahul. And then, I would like to start with adversity, finding opportunity in adversity. I mean, hackers, they take it literally, right? And 2020, as you mentioned, was literally for them a mother load of opportunities, right? While we were all we were all struggling with the progress and how we can make sure we go to the next level in terms of business. This was the biggest, I think, testing limits for us, right? And of course, I would like to highlight few aspects, starting with ransomware. So ransomware maintained and kept on being the mainstay for 2020. It was a major concern. We saw rise of ransomware. So if you look at 2019, it was around 97 families, but then 2020 saw a rise in terms of 127 different new families, right? And while we are talking about complex APT attacks, complex campaigns, one very important thing to note here is phishing would still remain a widely used strategy, and that was the case in 2020 also, right? We saw almost around we detected around 17, 16 billion COVID-related themes, and 90% of them were only because of the malicious spams, right? And why they use it is only because of the simplicity and effectiveness. It's so simple to do a phishing email, and it is so effective, and the results are multifold, right? Again, and as you spoke about supply chain attack, so it's not something new to the industry, cyber industry, right? We had seen in the case of Target, right, some few years back, and last year we again saw something very very unique in which this attack had happened, and then how cyber criminals. When they know that they cannot attack the organization directly because there are so many defenses in place, they circumvent these defenses, and they exploit the weak part of the supply chain, right? And that is what happened last year. And because of I think we adopted this new normal of work from home, I think VPN became very critical, right, in ensuring that we are protecting the network connections. And by virtue of that, again, hackers saw this opportunity, and they started exploiting the VPN vulnerability. Applications like, especially for video conferencing, like Zoom and Slack, these were used uh, like never before. And we started hearing and seeing things like Zoom bombing. And we started also seeing wherein fake applications, malicious installer for this application, right? And there were videos floating around where we see instances of Zoom bombing. Cloud adoption, I think we have been ranting and raving about it, that it has increased exponentially. Yeah, COVID had proven to become a catalyst to this. So what we saw is misconfiguration, and this is cited by a lot of analysts that misconfiguration of assets and services was one of the major reasons, and then that continued to be the challenge for adoption of cloud last year, and a lot of breaches were because of this misconfiguration. Uh, Lastly, I think the report also highlights, and again, for us to note is that since we were working from home, home routers, unlike the typical network we have, office network we have, they are vulnerable. And suddenly we saw exponential increase in the nature of these attacks on the home routers. That is industrial IoT. So, yeah, that's pretty much to sum about what we saw in the report last year.
Exciting and also at the same time very alarming. You had very distinctly mentioned certain areas on which I would like to take your inputs one by one in a slightly more elaborate way. Starting with ransomware, I mean, there's no bigger menace in cybersecurity right now than ransomware. So ransomware-related incidents have been on the rise, so much so that ransomware as a service is now a big trade. It's a multi-billion-dollar trade. How do you see that affecting the enterprise going forward?
Okay, very interesting. I think I have very closely been observing how the ransomware has evolved, right? So now we call it as modern day ransomware, which is more opportunistic, I would say. So it has it evolved from being just another malware which comes and resides on your machine and encrypts the data on the machine, to becoming very very focused, right? And this is what we had seen. So 2017-18, we saw Locky ransomware, which used to compromise the machine and encrypt the data. And then we saw WannaCry, right? And how it started laterally spreading, which was never the case in case of ransomware. And the second different variant, which we encountered, was exploiting the SMB vulnerability. So we never saw that ransomware exploiting unpatched vulnerability and abusing weak remote desktop security, using other malware families as a part of their routine, right? So while we saw this evolution, at the forefront of it last year, Rook ransomware was very very prominent. Rook and Maze ransomware, and I would not like to take names, but then we saw a lot of big companies in India got compromised, and they were in the news, right? And that was actually very surprising, because especially in the second half of the year, it just grew, and I was witness to a lot of such compromises, right? Why Rook? I'll tell you, because the range of delivery method. Most commonly, it is always a malware, but they started using penetration software also. And very recently, what was also observed, that they used a Trojan loader and this was distributed using phishing email. So yes, we had witnessed this. One interesting aspect of ransomware is unlike what it used to be, wherein it used to compromise only endpoints and only Windows operating system. We saw it started compromising Linux operating system as well. Last year, as I said, that COVID became like an opportunity for hackers, and government, healthcare, banking. These were organizations which were hardest hit, right? And if you look at it closely, these are the organizations who were trying to find a solution or an answer to COVID, how we can come out of it, right? And this was an opportunity for them, especially manufacturing, I would say, because when it comes to manufacturing, they of course adopt the standard security practice, right, which is there. But one part which gets unnoticed, and I was talking to one of the CIOs, CISOs in manufacturing vertical, and while they were recovering and there were from the ransomware attack, right after the assessment, one thing which was to be noted that all the practices were in place, but the OT, which is actually the production environment, the industrial control system. That was one area which was missing. And then the reason for that is when we look at solutions, one thing which comes into mind that we don't want to induce latency. So we have to find a solution which has low latency, doesn't impact the production. Second is visibility in IT and OT. So I can send data across IT and OT. Third important aspect is if I'm able to detect across these both the environments. And when I say detect, the solution should be able to understand the protocols because they are very different from regular IT and network, right? And if I'm able to do that, and if I'm able to send data between the network segments, thereby I can simplify my response and I can be more proactive, I would say. So that's what ransomware did last year.
Yeah, so I can very clearly see from your response that what happened to be a very conventional method of waging a cyber war into an organization became a very important strategic tool in the hands of ransomware groups, and they became more sophisticated, more creative, and more lethal in terms of how they impacted those organizations. So if we move on a little bit and talk about threat actors that continue to compromise the company's supply chain attacks. You briefly talked about Target in the beginning, and then later on last year there was a large supply chain attack which was operated or using SolarWinds vulnerabilities. So how can that be prevented? That's again becoming a big menace to the businesses.
Right, Rahul. As I mentioned previously, the hackers take advantage of the trust model, which is built within the organization and its suppliers and partners, and they find out the loophole. Uh, the solar wind attack, the compromise was little different, and this was one of those compromise which was highly publicized, and it was as recent as in December, right? So what really happened? Let's look at what happened. So the malicious attacker, what they did was they inserted a vulnerability in Orion software, which is network monitoring. And we are not new to this. So, we use so many softwares, applications, and we keep on getting updates, whether it is bug fixes or new features as an update. And consciously, unconsciously, we don't pay too much of attention, and we trust the vendor and we install those patches. Whereas in case of Orion, this was the trust which was exploited by the hacker. The software build, which had this compromise, was installed on all the servers. And then, mind you, we are talking about 18,000 customers. This was the official report. However, they have around 33,000 customers in the US and globally. Right. So what happened is once this relevant update was published to the customers, the attackers were able to deploy a powerful backdoor, right? And this was known as Sunburst on the infected machines. So once this backdoor is implanted, this gave attacker complete access to their systems and network. What I could do is I could gather system information, I can read and delete files, I can delete registries, and disable various different tools which are there, and can do other malicious activities, right? So uh, this was something very unique. Now, if you after this incident, after this happened, and this was in public, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, they issued an advisory that isolate these machines, take it offline, don't reconnect till the time you have rebuilt everything, you have installed the hot fixes, and it is certified that it is safe, right? but easier said than done, right? But what do we do? That's the question we have to answer. That when we come across something like this, and this, we can't say that it won't happen in future. We will still see supply chain attacks. So I think two critical aspects which we have to understand is, one is very simple. I think most of the organization might adopt it, but then I think I would like to emphasize this best practice. So as a best practice, we always have a staging environment. We test the update and the patch, we monitor it, and then we roll it out in production in a phased environment, in a phased manner, right? So we don't do the big bang approach, right? And that is where consciously, I think consciously, unconsciously, we somehow download the update and it is immediately rolled out. Second thing is, what do we do when you don't have a patch? Because I have told you about the vulnerability, but it will take some time for me to give you the fix for it, right? And that's where virtual patching comes in very handy. And this is what we believe in Trend Micro also. Virtual patching becomes a very important tool wherein it can give you that breathing period, and it can help you patch those vulnerabilities till the time you don't have an actual patch, right? So that is, these are two things which I would like to highlight now.
No, how beautifully and subtly you had explained what happened in case of solar winds, and how devastating it could be if you don't. How good it could be, if I can rephrase myself, how good it could be if you can just follow simple procedures. And in the last 2 points that you explained, the best practices, I think it could have been very easily averted if the company had followed that. However, what has happened is a big lesson to the industry, and I'm hopeful that it does not get repeated in the future. So something that you also mentioned was about zero log on vulnerability. It was an eye opener for the security industry, and it became a nightmare for the company's critical infrastructure to be protected. What are your views on how Trend Micro was prepared to protect its customers from this kind of challenge?
So zero logo was actually an eye opener for everyone, I would say, and then I will tell you the reason for it. First, why it is called zero logo? Because attacker can successfully deploy an exploit, and it is simply authenticated by string of zeros. So three things which we have to understand. I can I can execute this attack in flat 3 seconds. Okay, so that's simple. The proof of concept of exploit. So I have an exploit which is publicly available. So all I have to do is go online and download that exploit as easy. Third thing why it was very critical is the severity level was 10 out of 10. The CVSS score was 10, and this vulnerability was announced in September. What Zero Logon did, right? The attacker could take control of domain controller and either change or remove the password and have access to almost everything. So I can launch a denial of service attack. I can even take over the entire network. And to an extent that by using the publicly available exploit, I can do a complete ransomware attack. So bring down the complete organization. And Rahul, this is what I've seen in most of the organizations or attacks which have happened recently, that Active Directory domain controller is the crown jewel of crown jewels, I would say. Once the attacker compromises the Active Directory or domain controller, he has access to everything and anything, right? So the good news was that okay, Microsoft had released the patch in August, and then however, the patch was released in phased manner. So this was very unique. You have never seen something like this before. The first phase, of course, of the patch came in August. The second phase was in February. So for 7 months, right, customer were trying to figure out, or organization trying to figure out that what do we do, how do we take care of this vulnerability, right? And this is where I feel that it is very important to understand that how do you take care of such scenarios, right? More than often, it's been talked about that the new age technology or the new age products which are dependent on and heavily relying on artificial intelligence and machine learning is answer to everything. But that is not the case. This was proven by Zero Logon. So you need to make sure that you have a right combination of traditional as well as modern technique, right? You can't just ignore what we have been doing for last so many decades, right? And this is what we did in Trend Micro, and this is how we help the customer. So first I mentioned virtual patching. It has to be a multi-layered approach. So with our tools at the network level, we could monitor and we had rules. Moment this vulnerability was announced, which could tell you that whether there is a connection made from a vulnerable device related to zero log on. Second, by virtue of tipping point, we were able to do the network patching before even the patch was released. Let me tell you that we were able to block these connections. Third important thing is at the host level, that is at the desktop and server level, we have our solutions like Deep Security, which was helping customers for doing virtual patching till the time the actual patch was available, which was 6 months later, 7 months later, right? So by doing that, we were able to protect the customer, and this has been the USP, I would say, for us, and this is where customers see value in Trend Micro when it comes to protecting the servers, that we are able to provide those virtual patches, and it has been very effective. One important aspect is because we have the largest database of zero-day vulnerability, and we invest a lot in that. Yeah. So that was about zero log.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think the listeners might have got the recipe of what can happen, which is totally unpredictable, and how technology has to be blended. It's not always true that the new technology will come for your rescue automatically. So you have to be prepared for that challenge and blend the technology, which is blend the new and old technologies, and that's how you create the solutions. Wonderful. So if Vijendra, I now move on from the Trend Micro report and some of the stunning revelations that it got to another report, which I'm referring to, comes from Enterprise Strategy Groups, which is the report's name was Cybersecurity in the C-Suite and the Boardroom. Now, this report reveals that almost 69 to 70% of business and technology leaders believe that cybersecurity is entirely or mostly a technology area with little or no linkage to the business, while only a very minuscule 11% equate cybersecurity with regulatory compliance. So, has cybersecurity not become a boardroom issue yet? I mean, so much has been spoken about cyber attacks, so much has been spoken about reputational and financial damages to the organization. So, what does it take to create more awareness about the importance of cybersecurity at a board level? How would it get the due importance that it requires?
Right, Rahul. So I would like to take a cue from what you mentioned, that how would it get the due importance? I would say that yes, it is becoming a boardroom discussion, but yes, I think it is still to gain that importance within the board members. So, of course, board of directors are not directly responsible when it comes to cybersecurity, but the security culture in the organization, or the structure, or the governance plays a very important role in overall defining the cyber health of the organization, right? And then more than often we have seen that cyber security professionals, they say that they are okay with good enough security, not good security, right? And however, there is a good news and bad news. The good news is that of course we have seen increase in the budgets, and there has been more spending in terms of cyber security. But I believe that it is closely aligned with, as you mentioned, the regulations, or having the basic hygiene in place, right? The reason for that is, I think, less involvement. So they still consider cybersecurity as a technology aspect, rather than understanding that it is a business thing and a business issue, right? So very simple things which I would talk about, to probably it can make more sense and it can get the due importance. One is, I think it is important that we start giving examples to the board. We start telling them about like phishing incidents, right, to the C level, that how they target the CEOs, CFOs, executives, right, and we tell them about BEC, business email compromise, the frauds which happen. Second thing is engage them, and then I would say that hit them where it hurts a lot, right? So we all know that how it impacts the organization in terms of share price when a breach happens, right? We have seen instances wherein in major breaches or attacks, people have lost their jobs, and the C-suite actually has lost their jobs in some cases. Reputation loss, we all know reputation and brand impact, and it has a long-term impact. There are guidelines and there are regulations wherein you are penalized, and there is a fine, substantial fine associated. So these things should be brought in light to them, and because they understand this language very well, more than us. So second thing is, you need to tell them that cybersecurity is not a technical matter. Okay, it's not only about technology. And then to prove that, we have something like phishing email, right? A phishing email, more than technology, I would say it is about human behavior and social engineering. right? So you need to make sure that psychologically we need to be prepared and understand, and that's where training comes very handy. So we like just no, just we talk about training the employees around cybersecurity and understand these kind of attacks. It is equally important that we give such kind of trainings and information to the board as well, right? And last and most important thing is, I think, return of investment. So they are very much interested in show me the result, right, of what you have invested in. So I think it is very important that every time we make a small investment, whether it is in people, process, or technology, we show them the result, right? And vice versa is also true. I think they should also ensure, I think businesses should also ensure that security teams are involved in the business making process initially, right? Rather than probably once you have made the decision and then you tell them, okay, now take care of security, right? So that would be my response to how it can get important.
No, great. I think that's precisely the recipe of how to gain how to gain that seat in the boardroom for the CISO. It's actually not happening at a wide scale, at a wide ranging scale yet, but I'm sure it will start happening when the CISO goes inside the board and gives them the examples. When the CISO realizes that good enough security is not important, good security is important, and perfect. So moving on, you have also briefly mentioned in the first question that I asked you. You briefly mentioned about there's a sustained and even heightened traction in terms of cloud adoption, especially after the global lockdown due to the COVID-19. Is cloud becoming the new normal? What are the factors behind this shift? Most of the people we interact with are working towards a hybrid cloud strategy, as they call it. What should be their top priorities when it comes to securing that hybrid cloud environment? Because most of the data and applications are now going to reside in that environment.
Right, Rahul. So I think, yeah, pandemic has caused a lot of disruption. Business leaders were always dabbling that how do I make my business environment agile, right? And we have seen that yes, it is getting cloud is getting adoption is increasing. In some of the statistics, it was stated that it is growing. The spending is growing by 37%, right? And actually virtual work is in urgency to ensure that the technology services which are provided are scalable, secure, reliable, and also cost effective, right? And this and Gartner also talks about on one side that yes, IT spending overall has slowed down, but at the same time spending has increased by about 19%, right? And some of the organizations or industries which has contributed is which is new is like chemical, automobiles, beverages, and foods. So they have started contributing. And then if you look post-COVID or pandemic, right, there were organizations which were shying away from adopting cloud, or they have a long-term plan. However, with COVID, they understood that how agile the environment should be for the employees, especially in case of work from home, and the adoption has increased now. So yes, it is a new normal, and enterprises are now using a plethora of resources and services available in the cloud. Customers have gone from just experimenting. I would say that previously it was all about how the cloud works. Let me experiment to transformation where they've started putting system applications, data, they're migrating it to the cloud. In fact, they've extended to see that how it can be optimized and enable revenue from them, right? So security becomes very important in this transformation, and this is where Trend Micro comes in and helps customers to build and automate, provide visibility and compliance when it comes to cloud. So two aspects critically which would help or to enable this shift. One was visibility for the security team. So in traditional environment, when everything was on premise, it was easy. I could send everything to the SIM log and I get visibility. Whereas in case of cloud, securities were concerned because visibility on the cloud with a lot of moving parts, we are talking about containers, serverless, it was difficult. At the same time, developers who are developing the software, they were always keen to build services fast, using microservices architecture, and they didn't want security to slow them down, right? And the motivation factor I would say for this shift was one, of course, keeping the cost in on-premise data center. They wanted to ensure that the new applications are now hosted in the cloud for the customer. The second motivation, which I could feel, that complete shutdown, right, which is called as data center exit, right? So, however, it cannot happen overnight. So that's where I think we see a lot of organizations today, a lot of large enterprises, they are having this hybrid cloud environment, right? They have applications which are on premise, which is in virtual environment, and they also have applications hosted in the cloud, right? Now the question is that how do we secure this hybrid cloud environment, right? So the approach is simple. I think if we still stick to defense in depth approach, wherein we secure each and every layer, starting from securing the network, whether it is on premise or in the cloud, to securing individual hosts, encouraging developers that, and this is something which is very, very important, which is called a cultural shift from DevSecOps, right? Bake the security inside their application by building. So automated security workflows to be built in the lifecycle. So while we are doing that, I think, and this has been highlighted in the report also, that misconfiguration was one of the important aspects, and that led to the major challenge of cloud adoption and led to breaches also, right? And Gartner states that 99% of cloud security issues in 2025 will be because of mismanagement, misconfiguration, and such mistakes, right? So what do we do? So Trend Micro provides a platform which is called as Cloud One, which is very, very comprehensive. So it takes care of your network security with cloud IPS to ensure that we monitor the traffic. On the second case, what we do is we make sure that we are protecting your host. We are taking care of your compliance during the build phase and identifying the vulnerabilities as we speak. And then so also when the files which are sent to storage, right, which is either Amazon S3 bucket or Azure Blob, so we take care of that. We scan those files. We have capability of also ensuring that we secure the applications in serverless architecture. So right from the farthest shift left to the production environment, we are taking care of everything when it comes to your hybrid cloud architecture, hybrid cloud. Yeah. So
Great.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think the thing that the security teams need to be very careful about is misconfiguration and mismanagement of the cloud. And very in a very defined way, you also explained how Trend Micro comes into play when it is about the management, compliance management, and the governance of this growing cloud infrastructure and the cloud of cloud. So, Vijay, in the end, let's talk about Trend Micro's vision for a secured enterprise, both from an Indian and global points of view. How does the company help in customers through a range of solutions, including the latest release? I was very impressed by this Vision One release that just happened. So, if you can explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Rahul, we've adopted this name Trend Micro Vision One as opposed to Trend Micro XDR to signify that the platform continues to extend and grow beyond XDR, right? Over a period of time, what we want is Trend Micro Vision One can become an integrated threat defense platform for the security team. And of course, XDR capabilities will lie at the core of it and become a primary value proposition, right? We have seen customer and industry today are talking about hot topics like XDR, SASE, zero trust framework. So what we have done is Vision One is a platform which can help customer to look at Trend Micro as a holistic security partner, right? Let's look at Vision One. What is the problem we are trying to solve with Vision One? Of course, one, break down the siloed visibility and process, enabling the correlation and detection across multiple security layers, that is endpoints, servers, emails, cloud, network, and mobile. So it becomes your one console for policy management as well as third-party intel sharing. So one thing which is unique, and I would like to stress on it, is that Vision One looks at security posture of the company to drive a cyber risk score. And this is something which CISOs and CIOs are very interested in, to understand what is the cyber risk score. So it identifies which are the risky users, which are the risky devices, the cloud apps, whether these cloud apps are sanctioned or not sanctioned, right, by the IT. It also ensures that user devices which are accessing the cloud, right, whether it is application data or services, it is in a secured way. So this helps to build customer a complete SASE framework, right? And at the end of it, are the users, devices, and applications healthy, which are connecting or attempting to use my corporate applications? So by virtue of that, what we do is finally, Vision One as a platform helps customer to build a zero trust framework. Now, how are we helping? I think one important aspect which I would like to again highlight is that while all these services or platform is offered as a service, so we are talking about software as a service a lot these days, right? And it is all offered from cloud. And we have regulations in industry, especially in some industries like banking and finance, where you cannot use solutions or host data outside India as a geography, right? So you have to comply to those regulations, and this is slowly going to come to other industries also with the data privacy law, which is coming up. So being conscious of this fact, Trend Micro is invested into this, and then we are the first cybersecurity company, I would say, which has hosted this platform in India data center. So irrespective of whether you are a government entity, whether you are a public sector unit, whether you are a banking, you can use this platform and not worry about data sovereignty. So the XDR as a platform or Vision Gun as a platform is hosted in India, and we have got endpoint security. So almost everything which is offered as a service is hosted out of India. So I would say that helps a lot for organizations to take decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big concern for especially for organizations which are heavily regulated and are compliant to local laws. I think this was a fantastic discussion with you, Vijay. It was indeed excellent for me, and as well as I'm sure the listeners and the viewers will also have may also have learned a lot of things. It will come handy in handling some of their challenges at hand, and it was simply fantastic talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, and happy to share my thoughts. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.